The stars above Velera Prime had always been peaceful and quiet until the day they filled with fire and death. Commander Thyrex stood on the bridge of his massive warship called the Unassailable and watched the planet below with cold satisfaction in his 4 eyes. His fleet of over 100 vessels hung in orbit like hungry predators waiting to devour their prey. The Korvathi Dominion had come to claim another world, and nothing in this sector of space could stop them. "Begin the orbital bombardment," Thyrex ordered with a wave of his clawed hand. His officers obeyed without question, and soon bright lances of energy rained down upon the beautiful cities of the Velen people. Explosions bloomed across the planet's surface like terrible flowers of destruction. Buildings that had stood for thousands of years crumbled into dust within seconds. Gardens that had been tended by countless generations burned to ash. The Velens were a gentle species who had never known war. They had evolved on a paradise world where the gravity was light and the sun was kind. Their bodies were slender and delicate, with soft blue skin and large, trusting eyes. They had spent their entire history creating art and music and philosophy. They had never built a single weapon because they had never imagined that anyone would want to hurt them. Now they died by the thousands as the Korvathi fleet rained destruction upon their world. In the capital city of Velenith, the buildings shook and collapsed as bombs fell from the sky. Elder Sinith crawled through the rubble with blood dripping from wounds across their fragile body. Dust filled the air and made it hard to breathe. The screams of the dying echoed through streets that had once been filled with laughter and song. Sinith had lived for over 200 years and had seen many wonderful things. They had watched their people create magnificent works of art. They had listened to music that could make anyone weep with joy. They had read philosophy that explored the deepest questions of existence. But they had never seen anything like this horror that now consumed their world. "We must reach the old tower," Sinith gasped to the young Velen who helped them move through the destruction. "But Elder, the tower is ancient," the young one replied with fear in their voice. "No one has used it in over a century." "It is our only hope," Sinith insisted as another explosion rocked the ground beneath them. The old tower stood at the heart of the city and had been built long before anyone alive could remember. It housed a communication device that was unlike anything the Velens themselves had ever created. The device had been a gift from visitors who had come to Velera Prime many generations ago. Those visitors had been strange and terrifying creatures from a world called Earth. They had been so different from the Velens, with their dense, heavy bodies and their intense forward-facing eyes. They had moved with a predatory grace that had frightened many Velens at first. But they had also been kind and curious, and had shown great interest in Velen art and culture. Before the humans had left, they had given the Velens a gift. It was a communication beacon that could send a message across the vast distances of space. The human ambassador had clasped Sinith's ancestor's hand and had spoken words that had been passed down through the generations. "If you ever need help, then activate this beacon. No matter how far away we are, and no matter how long it takes, we will come. This is our promise to you, and humans never break their promises to friends." That had been over 100 years ago, and no human ship had visited Velera Prime since then. Many Velens had begun to think that the humans were just a legend, or perhaps a dream. But Sinith remembered the stories, and Sinith believed. The old tower was damaged, but still standing when Sinith finally reached it. The young Velen helped the elder climb the ancient stairs that wound up through the structure. Each step was agony for Sinith's wounded body, but they refused to stop. Too many lives depended on reaching the top. The communication device sat in a small room at the very peak of the tower. It was covered in dust and had not been touched in decades. But when Sinith placed their trembling hands upon it, the machine hummed to life with a soft blue glow. "Please still work," Sinith whispered as they activated the beacon. "Please let them hear us." The device sent out a pulse of energy that shot through space faster than any Korvathi signal could travel. It carried a simple message in the human language that Sinith had learned from the ancient records. To our friends among the stars, we remember your promise. Our world burns and our people die. Please help us. On the bridge of the unassailable, the Korvathi sensors detected the strange transmission. A young officer brought it to Commander Thyrix's attention with confusion on his face. Commander, we have detected an unusual signal from the planet's surface. It appears to be some kind of distress call, but it uses a frequency we have never encountered before. Thyrix looked at the data with mild curiosity. Can you determine who it was sent to? No, Commander. The signal left our sensor range almost immediately. It was traveling at speeds that should be impossible. Thyrix dismissed the matter with a contemptuous snort. It does not matter. There is no species in this region of space that could challenge the Dominion. The Velans are alone and helpless. Continue the bombardment and prepare landing parties to secure the major cities. Yes, Commander, the officer replied with a bow. Thyrix turned back to watch the planet burn beneath his fleet. Victory was already assured, and nothing could change that. The Velans would become slaves of the Dominion, and their world would be stripped of resources. It was the fate of all weak species who could not defend themselves. He had no idea that his signal officers had just detected the activation of a promise made long ago. He had no idea that across the galaxy ancient systems were coming to life. He had no idea that something was coming and that something was very, very angry. In the ruins of Velanith, Elder Sinith collapsed beside the communication device. Their body was failing from wounds and exhaustion. The young Velan held them gently and wept. Did it work, Elder? Will anyone come? Sinith managed a weak smile despite the pain. I do not know, young one, but I have faith. The humans promised, and something tells me they are not the kind of species that forgets. Above them, the Korvathi fleet continued its merciless assault. Below them, the cities burned. But somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, a message was racing toward its destination. And somewhere, a species born on a world of death and danger was about to receive a call for help. The humans were about to remember their promise. 12 hours after the distress signal left Velora Prime, the fabric of space itself began to scream. Commander Thyrix was in his private quarters, reviewing reports of the conquest when alarms began blaring throughout his ship. He rushed to the bridge with his heart pounding in his chest. His officers were staring at their screens with expressions of pure confusion and growing terror. What is happening? Thyrix demanded as he took his command chair. Commander, there are massive energy readings appearing at the edge of the system. His sensor officer reported with a trembling voice. Something is tearing through subspace, but the readings make no sense. No species travels through space like this. The Korvathi understood faster-than-light travel very well. They used gentle warp fields that bent space slowly and carefully. It was efficient and safe and civilized. What was happening now was none of those things. Massive rifts tore open in the darkness between stars. The wounds in space glowed with furious energy and crackled with power that made Korvathi sensors overload. It looked like something was forcing its way through reality itself, with brute strength rather than finesse. Then the ships emerged. 17 vessels burst from the rifts and immediately took up combat formation. They were unlike anything in Korvathi records. These ships were blocky and angular, with thick armor plating and visible weapon batteries covering every surface. They were painted in dark colors, and their hulls were covered in scars from countless battles. These were not elegant craft designed for peaceful exploration. These were machines built for one purpose, and that purpose was war. Identify those vessels immediately, Thyrix ordered with ice in his voice. His officers worked frantically at their consoles. Data scrolled across screens as the Korvathi database searched for any match. Finally, an answer came and it made the blood drain from every face on the bridge. Commander, the database has found a match, but the records are over a century old. These vessels appear to be from the Sol system. They are human ships. Thyrix felt his 4 eyes widen with shock. Humans were supposed to be a minor species on the far side of the galaxy. They were listed in Dominion records as primitive and barely capable of interstellar travel. How could they be here, and how could they have arrived so fast? The largest of the human ships moved to the front of the formation. It was a dreadnought-class vessel that dwarfed even Thyrix's flagship. The name painted on its hull read TSS Indomitable, and below that name were rows upon rows of small symbols. Thyrix did not know it, but those symbols represented every battle the ship had fought and won. "Commander, we are receiving a communication request from the human flagship," the communications officer announced. "Put it through," Thyrix commanded. He would show these primitives that they had made a terrible mistake by coming here. The main view screen flickered and then displayed a human face. Thyrix studied the alien creature with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. The human appeared to be a female with dark skin and gray hair cut short. Her eyes were small and forward-facing like a predator. Her face was lined with age, but her gaze was sharp and cold. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Third Fleet," the human said, in a voice that carried absolute authority. "You have attacked our allies, and you will withdraw immediately. You have 1 hour to leave Velen space. There will be no second warning." Thyrix almost laughed at the absurdity. His fleet outnumbered these newcomers 5-1. The humans had clearly made a massive miscalculation. "Admiral Vasquez," Thyrix replied with condescension dripping from his words, "I do not know how you came to be here, but you have made a grave error in judgment. Your tiny fleet is surrounded by the might of the Korvathi Dominion. Surrender now, and I may allow your crews to live as slaves rather than corpses." The human admiral did not seem impressed or frightened. Instead, she smiled, and Thyrix saw her bare her teeth in a display that made something primitive in his brain scream with fear. Those were not the teeth of a prey animal. Those were the teeth of something that ate other creatures. "Commander, I want to make something very clear," Admiral Vasquez said slowly. "We are not surrounded by your fleet. Your fleet is not surrounded by us. You are simply within range of our weapons, and we have been waiting a very long time to use them on someone who deserves it." Thyrix cut the communication with an angry gesture. "All ships prepare for combat. We will crush these arrogant primitives and then finish our conquest of this worthless planet." His fleet began to move into attack formation. 103 Korvathi warships against 17 human vessels. The numbers were overwhelmingly in the Dominion's favor. Victory was certain, but as the fleets positioned themselves for battle, Admiral Vasquez stood calmly on her bridge. Around her, the crew of the Indomitable prepared for combat with practiced efficiency. These men and women had trained their entire lives for moments like this. They had been born on a world that tried to kill them every single day, and they had survived. They had no fear of death because death was an old familiar enemy. "Admiral, all ships report ready for combat," her executive officer announced. Elena Vasquez looked at the tactical display showing the enemy fleet. She thought about the burning cities on the planet below. She thought about the Velen people who had called for help and had trusted that humans would answer. She thought about the promise made over a century ago. "Signal all ships," she ordered with steel in her voice. "Today we remind the galaxy why they should never threaten our friends. All hands battle stations. Prepare to engage the enemy." The 17 ships of the Terran Third Fleet powered up their weapons and raised their shields. They were outnumbered and far from home. By any rational calculation, they should have been afraid. But humans had never been very good at rational calculations when their friends were in danger. The Korvathi had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that numbers alone would guarantee victory. They had never faced a species born on a death world. They had never encountered creatures who had clawed their way to the top of their planet's food chain through sheer stubborn refusal to die. They were about to learn what the rest of the galaxy already knew. Never anger a human, and never ever threaten someone they have sworn to protect. The battle for Velera Prime was about to begin. The Korvathi opened fire first, and their confidence lasted exactly 4 minutes before it shattered into a million pieces. Commander Therix watched with satisfaction as his fleet unleashed a devastating barrage against the human vessels. Energy beams and missiles streaked across the void. The firepower directed at the Terran ships should have been more than enough to reduce them to burning wreckage. But something impossible happened. The human ships absorbed the punishment and kept coming. Their thick armor plating glowed red-hot from the impacts, but did not break. Their shields flickered under the assault, but held firm. These vessels had been built to survive conditions that no Korvathi engineer could have imagined. "How is this possible?" Thyrex demanded as the humans closed the distance. "Our weapons should have destroyed them 10 times over." His tactical officer studied the sensor data with growing horror. "Commander, the density of their hull plating is beyond anything in our records. Their ships appear to be designed to survive atmospheric re-entry on high-gravity worlds. Our standard weapons barely scratch them." Before Thyrex could respond, the humans returned fire. The TSS Indomitable's main batteries spoke with thunder and fury. Massive kinetic projectiles made of solid tungsten launched at incredible speeds. These simple chunks of metal carried more destructive power than any Korvathi energy weapon. The physics were brutal and elegant at the same time. Mass multiplied by velocity squared meant that even primitive projectiles became apocalyptic when accelerated fast enough. 3 Korvathi cruisers vanished in the first volley. They simply ceased to exist as the tungsten rounds punched through their thin armor and detonated their reactor cores. The explosions lit up the void like miniature suns. "Return fire," Thyrex screamed. "All ships concentrate on the human flagship." The Korvathi fleet focused their weapons on the Indomitable. Hundreds of energy beams converged on the massive dreadnought. The assault would have overwhelmed any civilized vessel in the galaxy. Admiral Vasquez did not even blink. "Damage report," she called out calmly. "Forward shields at 73%, Admiral. Hull integrity remains at 98%. The enemy weapons lack sufficient penetration power to threaten our primary systems." Vasquez nodded with grim satisfaction. "All ships execute attack pattern Omega. Show them what happens when you threaten our friends." The Terran fleet moved with deadly coordination. Human ships accelerated at rates that should have killed their crews. But human bodies had evolved on a world with crushing gravity. They could survive forces that would turn Korvathi soldiers into paste. The battle became a slaughter. Korvathi vessels tried to maintain distance, but the humans were faster. They tried to concentrate fire, but the humans were tougher. They tried to flee, but the humans were relentless. On the bridge of the Korvathi cruiser Righteous Fury Alarms screamed as a human frigate latched onto the hull. Boarding pods punched through the armor and disgorged their deadly cargo. Lieutenant Commander James Okongchu led his Marine squad into the enemy ship with his rifle blazing. He was a tall man with dark skin and muscles built by training in Earth's full gravity. He moved through the corridors like a hunting predator, and nothing could stop him. A Korvathi soldier stepped out from behind a corner and fired. The energy blast hit Okonkwo in the shoulder and burned through his armor. Pain exploded through his body, but he did not stop. He had been hurt worse than this in training exercises. He raised his rifle with his good arm and put 3 rounds through the alien's chest. Then he kept moving forward. The Korvathi boarding defense teams had trained to fight other Korvathi. They had trained to fight species that stopped when they were injured. They had trained to fight creatures that feared death. They had not trained to fight humans. Okonkwo's squad swept through the ship like death itself. They ignored wounds that should have been crippling. They pushed through exhaustion that should have been impossible. They fought with a ferocity that terrified the Korvathi to their cores. One Korvathi officer managed to access the ship's database during the chaos. He searched desperately for information about these monsters. What he found made him wish he had never looked. Earth was classified as a Category 12 death world. It was a planet where everything tried to kill its inhabitants. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere contained a highly reactive gas called oxygen that would poison most species. The weather systems included massive spinning storms and electrical discharges from the sky. The ground itself shifted and shook in events called earthquakes. The planet was bombarded by radiation from its own sun. And somehow life had evolved there. Anyway, humans were the apex predators of this nightmare world. They had survived by being tougher and meaner and more stubborn than anything else on their planet. They had domesticated wolves as hunting companions. They had spread across every environment on their world, from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. They had refused to die, no matter what the universe threw at them. The Korvathi officer understood now why his people were losing. They had picked a fight with creatures that had been forged in hell itself. Back on the indomitable Admiral Vasquez watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. 47 Korvathi vessels had been destroyed or disabled. Human casualties were minimal. The enemy fleet was breaking formation as ships tried desperately to escape. "Signal to all ships," Vasquez ordered. "No vessel escapes except the enemy flagship. I want Commander Thyrex alive. He has a message to deliver." The Terran fleet moved to cut off the retreat. Human pursuit craft piloted by men and women who could survive acceleration that would kill any other species hunted down fleeing enemies one by one. On the bridge of the unassailable Thyrex watched his fleet die around him. His officers begged him to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. The humans had them trapped. "Commander, we must surrender," his first officer pleaded. "We cannot win this battle." Thyrex wanted to refuse. He wanted to fight to the death rather than admit defeat. But as he watched another dozen of his ships vanish in nuclear fire, he realized the truth. The Korvathi had never been the predators here. They had never been the hunters. They had walked into a trap set by the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. And now they were paying the price. "Signal the human flagship," Thyrex whispered with the taste of defeat bitter in his mouth. "Tell them we surrender." The battle for Velera Prime was over. The Deathworlders had won. The guns fell silent over Velera Prime, but the work of the humans was only beginning. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on her bridge and surveyed the wreckage of the Korvathi fleet. 83 enemy vessels had been destroyed. 15 more had been captured. Only 5 had managed to escape into deep space. The Terran Third Fleet had suffered the loss of 2 frigates and damage to several other ships, but nothing that could not be repaired. It had been a complete and total victory. But as Vasquez looked down at the burning planet below, she felt no joy. The Korvathi had been stopped, but not before they had killed thousands of innocent felons. Cities lay in ruins. Families had been torn apart. A peaceful civilization had been scarred forever by violence it had never asked for. "Launch all medical and relief ships," Vasquez ordered with quiet intensity. "Get our people on the ground and start helping the survivors. I want every available hand working on rescue operations." "Yes, Admiral," her officers responded, and soon the human fleet was buzzing with activity. Dropships descended through the smoke-filled atmosphere of Velera Prime. They carried doctors and nurses and engineers and soldiers. They carried food and medicine and construction equipment. The humans had come prepared not just for war, but for everything that came after. In the ruins of the capital city, Elder Sinith had survived the night. The young Velen who had helped them reach the communication tower had found a safe shelter where they had hidden from the bombardment. Now, as dawn broke over the shattered skyline, they emerged to see something they could barely believe. Human ships filled the sky, but these were not warships. These were rescue vessels marked with bright symbols of healing. As Sinith watched in amazement, the ships landed in the ruined plaza and their doors opened. Humans poured out by the hundreds. They spread through the destroyed city with purpose and determination. Some began pulling survivors from the rubble. Others set up medical stations to treat the wounded. Engineers started clearing debris and checking buildings for stability. Sinith approached the nearest group of humans with tears streaming down their face. A young woman in a medical uniform noticed the elder and rushed over to help. "Are you injured?" the woman asked with concern in her voice. She was short and stocky by human standards, with kind eyes and gentle hands. But Sinith could see the strength in her body and knew that she could crush stone with those same gentle hands if she chose. "I am wounded, but I will survive," Sinith replied weakly. "I cannot believe you actually came. It has been so long since your people visited our world. Many of us thought you had forgotten." The medic smiled as she began treating Sinith's injuries. "We never forget our friends. It just took us a little while to get here. Space is pretty big after all." More humans arrived as the day went on. They worked tirelessly under the hot sun and did not seem bothered by conditions that would have exhausted any Velen. Sinith learned that the humans came from a world with much harsher conditions. Their sun was brighter. Their gravity was stronger. Their bodies had been built to endure far worse than anything Velera Prime could offer. A human soldier approached Sinith as the medical team finished their work. He was a tall, dark-skinned man with bandages wrapped around his shoulder. Despite his injury, he moved with energy and purpose. "Elder Sinith," the soldier said with a respectful bow. "I am Lieutenant Commander James Okonkwo. Admiral Vasquez has asked me to escort you to the flagship. She wishes to speak with you personally." Sinith was surprised by this request, but agreed to go. A small shuttle carried them up through the atmosphere and into the waiting embrace of space. As they approached the massive human dreadnought, Sinith felt a mixture of awe and fear. The ship was enormous and covered in weapons. It was clearly a machine designed for destruction. But it had come to save Sinith's people. Admiral Vasquez met them in a comfortable meeting room aboard the Indomitable. She was older than Sinith had expected, with gray hair and lines on her face. But her eyes were sharp, and her presence commanded respect. "Elder Sinith," Vasquez said warmly, "I am honored to meet you. I understand it was you who activated the beacon." "Yes, Admiral," Sinith replied. "I was not certain anyone would hear it. I was not certain anyone would care." Vasquez's expression softened. "A long time ago, my ancestors made a promise to your people. They said that if you ever needed help, we would come. Humans take promises very seriously. We may be slow sometimes, but we never forget." Sinith felt tears threatening again. "Your people have shown us great kindness. But I must ask why. Our species has nothing to offer you. We have no great military. We have no valuable resources. Why would humans risk their lives for us?" Admiral Vasquez was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "A long time ago, humans were not kind. We fought each other constantly. We destroyed and killed and caused terrible suffering. But over many centuries, we learned something important. True strength is not just about winning battles. True strength is about protecting those who cannot protect themselves." She leaned forward and looked into Sinith's eyes. "The Velens created beauty when others created weapons. You built a society based on art and philosophy, while others built empires of conquest. That makes you valuable beyond measure, and it makes you worth protecting. When we received your call for help, there was no debate. There was no discussion of costs or benefits. You were our friends, and you needed us. That was enough. Sinith finally understood. The humans were terrifying in war because they had been forged by a terrifying world. But they had chosen to use that terrible strength to protect the innocent. They had become the guardians of those who could not fight for themselves. "What happens now?" Sinith asked. "Now we rebuild," Vasquez replied. "Terran engineering teams will stay as long as you need them. We will help you reconstruct your cities and heal your wounded. And we will make it very clear to the rest of the galaxy that Velera Prime is under Terran protection." "And the Korvathi?" Vasquez's expression hardened. "Their commander is currently in our brig. I intend to send him home with a message. If the Dominion ever threatens your people again, they will face the full might of Earth and all her colonies. We have 12 more fleets like this one. I suspect they will choose to leave you alone." Sinith bowed deeply. "We owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Vasquez shook her head. "You owe us nothing. That is not how friendship works. You called and we answered. That is simply what humans do." Outside the viewport, the planet Velera Prime turned slowly. Its cities still smoked, but already the healing had begun. Human ships swarmed around it like protective guardians. The Deathworlders had come not to conquer, but to save. And somewhere deep in space, the surviving Korvathi ships fled toward home. They carried tales of terror that would spread through the Dominion like wildfire. The humans had returned to the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same. Commander Therix sat alone in his cell aboard the human dreadnought and contemplated the ruin of everything he had believed. 3 days had passed since the battle, and in that time his entire understanding of the galaxy had been shattered. He had thought the Korvathi Dominion was powerful. He had thought his fleet was invincible. He had thought that strength came from numbers and firepower and the willingness to crush the weak. He had been wrong about everything. The door to his cell opened, and Admiral Vasquez stepped inside. She moved with a calm confidence that Thyrex now found terrifying. This was not a creature who feared anything. This was an apex predator who had simply chosen not to kill him. "Commander Thyrex," Vasquez said as she sat down across from him, "your surviving ships are ready to take you home. But before you leave, I want to make sure you understand the situation perfectly." Thyrex said nothing. He simply listened. "Your fleet outnumbered us 5-1. You had every advantage that should have mattered. Yet in less than 2 hours, we destroyed over 80% of your vessels. My ships suffered minimal damage. My crews are already ready for another engagement." She leaned forward with cold fire in her eyes. "That was one fleet, Commander. The Terran Third Fleet. Earth has 12 more just like it. Each one is crewed by men and women born on a death world. Each one is equipped with weapons designed to fight enemies far more dangerous than the Korvathi. Each one can be here within days if we need them." Thyrex finally found his voice. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to go home and tell your superiors what happened here. I want you to describe every detail of this battle. I want you to make them understand that Velera Prime is now under Terran protection. Any attack on the Velen people will be considered an act of war against Earth." "And if they do not believe me?" Vasquez smiled and showed her teeth. "Then they will learn the same lesson you did. Except next time we will not be so gentle. We came here to defend our allies. If we have to come back to avenge them, we will not leave a single Korvathi vessel intact." Thyrex felt fear deeper than anything he had ever experienced. This was not a bluff. This was a promise. And now he understood the humans kept their promises. "I will deliver your message," Thyrix said quietly. "I do not believe my superiors will wish to test your resolve." "Smart," Vasquez replied. "You may leave now, Commander. I hope we never meet again." Thyrix was escorted to the last surviving Karvathi transport and sent on his way. He spent the long journey home writing his report. Every word was burned into his memory. Every moment of the battle played over and over in his mind. When he finally arrived at the Dominion capital, he was brought before the High Council. The most powerful leaders of his species gathered to hear his account. They expected news of victory and conquest. Instead, they received something that shattered their arrogance. Thyrix told them everything. He described the impossible speed of the human arrival. He described the invincible armor of their ships. He described the terrifying ferocity of their soldiers. He showed them the data recordings that proved every word. The council listened in stunned silence. When Thyrix finished his report, the chamber remained quiet for a long time. Finally, the Supreme Chancellor spoke. "You are telling us that a single human fleet destroyed 5 times their number." "Yes, Supreme Chancellor." "And they have 12 more fleets of equal power." "Yes, Supreme Chancellor." "And they are willing to go to war to protect a species that offers them nothing." "Yes, Supreme Chancellor." They called it friendship. They said that protecting the innocent is what strength is for. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. This was not how the galaxy was supposed to work. Power was supposed to be used for conquest and domination. The strong crushed the weak. That was the natural order. But the humans had changed the rules. Within days, the Karvathi Dominion officially declared that they had no interest in Velera Prime. They claimed that the initial attack had been a misunderstanding, and that they wished only for peaceful relations with the Velen people. Everyone knew it was a lie born of fear, but no one dared say so. Word of the battle spread through the galaxy like fire. Every species that had ever wondered about the mysterious humans now had an answer. The Deathworlders were real. They were powerful beyond imagination. And they had chosen to use that power as protectors rather than conquerors. On Velera Prime, the reconstruction continued for months. Human engineers helped rebuild cities. Human doctors healed the wounded. Human teachers shared knowledge and technology that would help the Velens defend themselves in the future. When the Terran Third Fleet finally departed, Elder Sinith stood in the central plaza of the rebuilt capital. Beside them stood a great monument that the Velens had constructed. It showed a human hand cradling a Velan figure, and at its base an inscription was carved in both languages. "From the world that tried to kill them, they came to save us. In our darkest hour Earth answered. We will never forget." Admiral Vasquez attended the dedication ceremony before her departure. She stood before the monument with Sinith at her side. "We leave you now," Vasquez said, "but we leave you with a gift. A subspace communicator that will allow instant contact with Earth. If you ever need us again, just call. We will come." Sinith clasped the Admiral's hand in the way they had learned humans preferred. "You have given us more than survival. You have given us hope. We always believed the universe was beautiful, but now we know it can also be kind." Vasquez squeezed Sinith's hand gently. "The universe is neither kind nor cruel. It simply is. But the people in it can choose what they want to be. We chose to be protectors. We chose to be friends. And we will never stop making that choice." The human ships rose into the sky one by one. They climbed through the atmosphere and vanished into the stars from which they had come. The Velens watched them go with gratitude overflowing from their hearts. Across the galaxy, other species watched and listened and learned. The humans were dangerous. The humans were terrifying. But the humans were also the best friends anyone could hope to have. And perhaps that was the most important lesson of all. In the grand history of the cosmos, Many empires had risen through conquest and fallen through defeat. But the humans had shown that true power came from something different. True power came from being strong enough to protect those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy would never forget the day the Deathworlders answered a call for help. And somewhere in the vastness of space, new alliances were being formed. New friendships were being made. New calls for help would one day be answered. Because that was what humanity had chosen to become. The protectors of the innocent. The friends of the forgotten. The answer to every desperate prayer. And they would never stop